Joining us now is Scott Cochrane, who serves as the Executive Director of Willow Creek, Canada. And his desire is to see the church in Canada become as healthy and vibrant as possible. And we want him to tell us about their upcoming annual Leadership Summit conference as well. It's exciting. It's expected to be attended by over 120,000 people, if it's like last year. Scott, welcome.
Thank you very much, Ron. Good to be here.
Good to have you with us. Now, from Kelowna, BC.
That's correct.
Beautiful part of the country.
Oh, it's gorgeous. Yeah.
Well, Scott, for those who might not be familiar with the term name, Willow Creek,
Right.
as many, especially in leadership, Christian leadership in Canada would know, but for our average viewer, explain what Willow Creek is all about.
Yeah, well, Willow Creek is, first and foremost, it's a church based just outside of Chicago and founded by its senior pastor, Bill Hybels. And they founded this church with some young people back in 1975, and it started to grow, and it started to grow. God was blessing this church in so many ways. People were coming to Christ, and as a result, they really had a desire to coach other churches as well. And that birthed something called the Willow Creek Association, which is a branch of the church designed to help other churches. And a few years later, it was starting to expand around the world. In fact, we opened a Canadian office for Willow Creek, and that's based in Kelowna, BC, which is my home.
All right. It certainly has had a major impact on Christian leaders around the world.
It really has. And it's, one of the things that Bill Hybels often says is, and I believe this to my core, and that is that the local church is the hope of the world. Mm-hmm. And that's because the local church stewards the gospel of Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. And then Bill goes on, he says something else, which I really like. He says, not only is the local church the hope of the world, but its future rests primarily in the hands of its leaders. Mm-hmm. Not just its pastors, but everyone who carries influence and responsibility and so on. And so our passion is to develop those leaders to their fullest.
My father, David Mainse, has always said, because he was a pastor years
Sure.
ago, and when he launched into television, he always said, God's address on earth is the local church, his primary address. And so we certainly believe the same as you.
Yeah.
Now, do you see hope for the church in Canada?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think truly more than ever. More than ever. You know, unfortunately, many of us read the headlines and we see the trends. It's not the Canada that we grew up in, some will say, and so on. But Ron, I have to tell you that the church in Canada is starting to burst out in ways we haven't seen in years and years and years. There are so many signs of health and vitality. And a big part of what our ministry wants to do is to sort of add fuel onto that fire, of seeing what God is already doing and then coming alongside and saying, how can we serve this? How can we see the church in Canada grow and impact even more lives?
That's good to hear. Now, this Leadership Summit began 17 years ago, and with about 400 people, something like that.
That's right.
And now, last year, it was attended because modern technology and video feeds around the world, 120,000.
Isn't that unbelievable?
How do you account for that kind of growth?
Well, that's a great question, and what an exciting story that is. You're right, it started with 400 people. Bill just said, if there's anyone who wants to talk about leadership and let's try to grow as leaders together, we'll do that. So 400 leaders gathered down in Chicago 17 years ago, and now you look at what's happened. And I think it's, first of all, because God is at work in His church. And His plan is to develop churches through the influence of leaders. And that idea and that concept has simply caught on around the world. And then I think you look at simply the quality of the faculty that this conference has assembled year after year after year. You know, just the best, sharpest thinkers in leadership, certainly from the Christian world, certainly from some of the world's top, best-known pastors and Christian communicators and so on. But also people have been attracted because leaders can learn from leaders from any field. And so there have been top leaders from the military. Colin Powell was one of our speakers a few years ago. There have been top speakers from the world of academia, from all sorts of different institutions, and from business, from the marketplace, and so on. And leaders love to get these principles and say, now, how does that apply to my leadership? How does that apply to my church? I think that's one of the reasons why it's simply grown so explosively around the world. You know, of those 120,000 who attended last year, over 7,000 were right here in Canada. And we're so excited to see how that's going to continue to expand to serve Canadian leaders.